Good evening. So today we are doing a very general question, but connected to spiritual. So it is more on the lines of how to be spiritual. You have to cut your video. Yeah. Okay. The question is, how does an average day look like for a material worldly person to be spiritual? What is an average day for a normal human being? This itself is a strange one, isn't it? Everybody thinks that they are not normal. They have an abnormal life. And especially in today's day and age, so it is very tough to say. They'll say, I get up in the morning, I have my calls, then I have another call, then I have another call, then I have another call. Most of the people have this strange way of saying. But the question is addressed how it looks like for a material worldly person to be in spirit. When a material worldly person looks at a spiritual person, he has got very strange ideas about the spiritual being. He thinks that they are some people who have. Here, when I say the spiritual being, I'm just telling you that we are not talking only of the enlightened spiritual being, but also those who are on the path, those who are sadhakas and beyond. For them, their day starts at 4 o'clock in the morning or 3:30 in the morning. And for a material worldly person to think about 3:30 and 4 o'clock is that is a time I go to sleep. How am I supposed to get up at that point in time? The reason why a spiritual person starts very early in the morning is because there is a particular portion in the day, in that particular day, which is in English, it is called the twilight. There is a twilight during the early mornings also when the sun is about to rise till that point. That means the night has gone away and then the daylight is going to come. That is one part of it. And the second part is when the sun sets and the night is about to come on. These two are very, very important timings. For a spiritual person to be in that particular time doing something is very important. Like, say, for example, the Gayatri Mantra or the Sandhya, they do. And this encourages them for going ahead in their spiritual world. So this time in the morning is very important. They get up, they do their ablutions, and after that, they either sit for meditation or do some kind of a japa. Then they go ahead with their daily activities. They can also do some kind of a yogic practice, and then they go about their daily activities. In most of the cases, it so happens that they don't have much in the morning, that means to eat or drink. Their breakfast time would be somewhere quite late, maybe around 7:30. Till that time, there are certain activities which they get into. It could be chanting also, because in most of the places they have chanting in the morning as well. Then they have a certain kind of a puja where you have to maybe wake up the god right in the beginning of the day, or then they would have some more Nam Japas. There are actually Sahasrars, 1001 names of God. That is also said. It can be anything. After breakfast at around 7 to 8 or something, in this time, or maybe 6:30 to 7:30, then everybody gets involved in the activities very much contained in the ashram. It could be everyday activities. It could be going to the Goshala, if there is a Goshala over there, or going to the library if there is a library over there. There are offices around, you can go to the offices. There are places of activity, maybe construction sites are going on, you can go and visit that. So it's a range of activities that happen. So I'm describing a general day, how it goes around, and thereafter there is a break for the lunch sometime at around 12ish or so, and then you may have a free time or you may not, depending again on where you are. The afternoon time is normally not considered much useful, so sometimes the people meet around, or maybe they again go back to the meditation or whatever activity which they were continuing. It can be called as a seva also. There are certain seva activities which happen. Then in the evening, some places they may have some kind of a tea or some beverage. After that, it's time for some more satsangs or chanting or meditation. And then at the close of the days, it's dinner time. The closing is normally after dinner. It's around 9:30 or so. There is a lights out. I think this is generally how the ashram atmosphere is, or when a person is there in spiritual, and this is what he does. Many a times the guru is available to the disciples, maybe for a half an hour or maybe an hour during the day, course of the day, if he is in the campus. If he is not, then the number 2 or number 3 person, whoever is in charge of the ashram over there, takes charge and does what is necessary. So this is in total for all those who have not experienced an ashram life. This is what generally it is about. Sometimes they have classes for certain studies. In some places they have a Ved Pathshala, a school where they teach Vedas. Sometimes they go through the teachings of the old saint who might have been in charge of the ashram. Some videos might be shown. Many places they also conduct tours, activities connected to the ashram. Now those who visit the ashram have a clear idea of how this works, but then this is not the hard and fast rule. This is generally how things work. So the day looks like this from inside the person who is on the spiritual path. He looks at it like this. Now let us talk about a sadhaka, or a person who is on his own, who has not yet started anything, might not have gone to any ashram. What does he do? Traveling is a very important thing which a sadhaka does. Now he can travel, he can go from place to place, visit holy places, pilgrimages, so on and so forth. Suppose he has been initiated, then that's a different set of rules that apply to him. So I have just given you an idea of how generally the scene is in ashram, outside the ashram, and so on and so forth. Now let us see from the material worldly perspective how this can be implemented. A material worldly person who is engrossed in his day-to-day life, running from pillar to post, earning money, and being engrossed in material worldly activities. He may be a householder for all you care, or she may also be. It's not just he, it can be a woman as well, or could be a young person. Now, both these people, they might not have got exposure to the ashram atmosphere, but they can practice. Now, for a person who is a material worldly person, my advice is simply this: try to get up as early as possible in the morning. I cannot account for your job timings, because sometimes the people, those who work in the IT and other industries, they have very odd timings because they are catering to people across the world. So then definitely there is an issue. In this case, let us assume that the person is not involved but has got certain time in the morning. So this person can get up early, carry out the ablutions, whatever that the person has to do, and try to do some kind of a meditation, some kind of a chanting, a kind of, taking the name of God. Once when there is a certain amount of light outside, the person should definitely go for a walk or at least to a gym. See, people practice yogic sadhana. They put the mat out and they do various asanas and all. I'm not saying that you should not do. Definitely, if you have been trained in that, you should do that. But at least a certain amount of walking, a certain amount of activity in the fresh air outside is very important. So once the person comes back from his walk, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, it depends exactly on the person, then you can start your daily material worldly routines. The material worldly routines could be taking a bath, having breakfast and getting ready to work, taking your office bags and so on and so forth. Now when you go to the office, you have ample time in hand. Sometimes people have half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours drive time, or they have to go by buses, they have to go by trains, or whichever way the person has to reach that destination. You have some time in hand. And believe me, you have done enough office work during the earlier days, so let us try to keep this time for your own spiritual growth. What is to be done at that point? Well, if you are not driving, then you can listen, or you can see also. But if you are driving, if you are the one who is a driver, then you cannot see something while driving. So you can listen. If you are having a car, then you listen to podcast. You can listen to some kind of a journal, some kind of interviews. Maybe what you can do is listen to some bhajans, kirtans, spiritual songs. There are so many of them. YouTube and all other, podcast channels and various other places, music videos and audios are available. You can put that on. That 1 hour journey will be really fruitful for you. Remember, once you reach the office, you have to listen to all the nonsense in the world. It is your office nonsense, your boss, your colleagues, the client, the customer, whoever you are facing, everybody is going to talk. And you would be involved sitting in front of the computer, desktop or whatever that is, and you are going to be engrossed throughout the day. So why not spend this drive time or the time to go to work in a very, very useful manner? So a material worldly person should utilize this time going to office and coming back from office, because this is a very important time. Never waste time. Every day, if you cannot listen to all these bhajans, kirtans, songs and all these things, then maybe you can listen to something interesting. An interview or something like that. But this is something which you can do. If you are traveling by train, and of course if there is place somewhere in the train, you can carry spiritual texts, you can carry books, you can carry with you storybooks of all the saints and sages. They are very helpful because you can learn a lot. There are lots of books, even new age books are there. You can learn, you can read them as well. And nowadays again, you can have the audio version of it and maybe put it in your ear and listen to it. Well, the whole day office work is going on. It's at the end of the day when you're going back, you can again utilize the time that way. Once you get back home, have your evening beverage or whatever that you wish to, and try to again do some kind of a activity connected to spiritual. Maybe do a half an hour jap or something which you can, like I said, in the morning time you could do. Try to do that. What happens during the course of the day is, when you keep your mind on God, you straight away get tuned to Him. It is called the devotional path. Devotion increases when you do this kind of activities. Reading scriptures, listening to bhajans, kirtans, taking the name of God, doing japa, all these are activities which are connected in the spiritual world. They take you very closer to the devotional path. Now, a very important point which you should try to do. For a material worldly person, it is difficult to find a spiritual master or a guru. But let us say you are fortunate enough to have one in your life. Try to connect. Try to get to this person. And then you can have a satsang with him. If there is a public satsang, nowadays everybody has, satsangs going online. Sometimes people have strange timings. Now today, I am having satsang at 4:30 in the evening. Seems like a very plausible time for me just now. But when people are going to office and doing their kind of a work, then this timing would be very tough. And if there is a live satsang going on, or if you have the opportunity to go in a nearby place where there are satsangs going on, you should visit that place. I still remember my foster father. What he would do is, every day when he came back from his walk means he would go to the market and come back. Whatever that was needed during the day, he would get it and keep it at home. Then he would set out in the evening to visit the Ramakrishna Mission. Ramakrishna Mission was about 3 to 4 kilometers from his place. This is in Calcutta. Not the main mission, the other place. So he would go over there, and there was a Swamiji over there who would give every day some beautiful satsang, and they would have activities going on over there. Some very beautiful songs were sung. So if you have a Ramakrishna Mission nearby, you can do that. Or if you have any other missions close by, if you really don't know any gurus, then you can go and visit these places and maybe join in their prayers. They normally get over at around 7:30 in the evening. You can come back home. You can have your dinner and take the name of God while going to sleep, and go to sleep. This is basically how I would advise a material worldly person should spend his day. Trying to become spiritual. I'm just saying, trying to become spiritual. Because spirituality, it's a matter of interest. In most of the people, they get bored with this kind of activity very soon. Unless and until destiny brings them to a grinding halt somewhere. Destiny brings them to a point where they really don't know the answer. Maybe somebody is suffering very badly in their family, a very dreadful disease. Someone is dead. or they have no job, there is no money left. When the person goes through difficult times, only man thinks about God, otherwise he never thinks of God. But what I said is an activity which you have to try to do. If you can spend even a certain amount of time for God, it is always going to be beneficial to you. So this is the way in which an average person, an average day should look like for an average material worldly person to be in spiritual. During the weekends, he can definitely visit some spiritual places. During the course of the year, he can take some kind of a pilgrimage. That would definitely help. Always be on the lookout for a spiritual master who may welcome you. See, the spiritual master, the spiritual guru as we call him, is the doorway to God. And that is the reason why I suggest that you have to keep your eyes, ears open. And once you are in connect, then he will be the person who can guide you how you can go about your day. All right. So we'll take another small question. What defines a man in spiritual? What defines a man in spiritual? There is no general definition for a man in spiritual. A man in spiritual could be an average human being, like Ramakrishna Paramahansa used to say, a person sitting in the mosquito net and taking the name of God when the night comes on. He's sitting in his bed under the mosquito net and taking the name of God. A spiritual person could be that. A spiritual person can be anybody. All right? So, a pure spiritual being is first and foremost engrossed in only spiritual matters. He is defined by the 3 Ds. The first one is dispassion. He is dispassionate in nature. Whatever that desires that a human being has, he has given up those desires. A spiritual being normally gives up all kinds of desires. He is detached. He may be staying with his family, but still he is in a complete detached state. There is no attachment whatsoever with anybody. That means he is performing his duties, and yet while performing his duties, he is completely doing it in a detached manner. There is no focus on any result of any kind. There is nothing like I scratch your back or you scratch my back. There is no need of trying to gain anything. There is nothing like expectations from anybody. A spiritual being has no expectations whatsoever. Then the third D is called discrimination. To know the real God, How do you see? Everything in this universe is unreal. What is real? That is the question a person has to ask himself and seek that answer. So discrimination is knowing the real from the unreal. What is real? God only is real, rest everything is unreal. So how do you see God? Seeing God in every human being, animal, bird or whatever. A person has to see God in everything. That is the third D. So these 3 Ds are very, very important to follow. When a person is on the path of spiritual, he may take instructions from his spiritual master. The spiritual master would normally teach the individual what he or she is supposed to do and carry on with his activities. Now, in the normal sense, in today's day and age, it is very difficult to find time. So then the day has to be divided for the person in all different activities. A spiritual person knows that seva and sadhana are two important words. Seva, service unto mankind. Any kind of service that you do which is going to be helpful to the mankind. It could be any kind. Maybe going and helping some poor children learn, their language or whatever. Maybe you are very good in mathematics or English. If you go and teach the local children over there, that is also a very good seva that you are doing. Any kind of seva. If somebody is digging a tunnel, a nalla. There was a young girl whom I was reading about, and this lady has transformed an entire village by reviving a river somewhere in North India. A very young woman. Now, you can take up activities like that. Environmental people, people who are crazy about environment, you can take up that. Or if you have some other kind of an activity in the form of a seva, that can be done. Sadhana, the different kinds of sadhanas that are prescribed to you, whatever the sadhana could be. Any kind of sadhana that you have been told to do, you should do. And it has to be done in clockwork precision. Please understand that you cannot have a Sunday off. This is not a Sabbath or something like that, We don't have Sabbath. We normally have 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Please understand, you enjoy your life in a normal way, isn't it? Every single day you feel, I need to drink tea, coffee and all these kind of things. You do that. Do you say today is Sunday, I'm not going to have that? No, you do that as well. So here, consider these activities, even what I said about sadhana, that you got to do on a regular basis. It has to be done in a clockwork manner. There are no Sundays. So in my place over here, if I have to get up at a specific time every day, I have to get up. There are no choices. You have to do that. You cannot say, last night I went to sleep at 2 a.m. in the morning, so I cannot get up at 4 a.m. in the morning. That is not a done thing. Okay? If you maintain this anywhere between 28 to 30 days, you will definitely achieve your end goals. So, seva, sadhana, shraddha, devotion. You have to be devoted to God. The devotion word also includes love. Okay? Love and devotion. And as Sai Baba said, the last word is called patience. Saburi. Patience is a very important word in the life of a spiritual being. If you are doing sadhana, a spiritual sadhana, I don't think if you have spent 1 year or 2 years doing sadhana, you should expect any kind of results. No. People do sadhana for 7, 14, 21, I don't know how many years. You keep on doing it. There is no activity in sadhana which you have to give up. Today I don't think I can carry on further like this. No. It is a continuous process. When things are going to click, nobody has any answer. So continue with it. So this is how a man in spiritual has to be. Alright, so we have come to the end of our question and answers. We'll move ahead. Okay, so we are doing Dasbodh, and we had done a chapter 2, and it was talking about the misery of family life, if you remember yesterday's day. The misery of family life continues. This is the third Dashaka, chapter 3, The Misery of Family Life, part 2. The man married again and forgot his sorrow. He considered himself happy again. If you recollect yesterday's story, it was talking about a person who loses his wife. So he cries. He cries and he says, I lost my dear one, and so on and so forth. And there is a big halla gulla going on. Person literally feels terrible, sad. Very soon, he starts looking out for another partner. And in a very small amount of time, he is already getting married to another person. Now you see how flimsy this love is, the word L-O-V-E is. There is no such thing as love in this world. It is only lust. Relationships based on this kind of, short term are not based on love at all. How is it that after the person dies, this person goes and marries another person? Then where was this love? If it was love, there should be no such thing happening, isn't it? A true lover never leaves the person. In spiritual, you know very well that you are not going to find God so easily. And if you are a lover of God, then you have to continue to be the lover of God. Suddenly you cannot give up one day and say, okay, now I have not found God, so I don't want to love Him. So tomorrow onwards, I'm going to look for somebody else. You can't do that, no? But the material worldly person has got a very flimsy nature. He keeps on dropping one person after another. It's very easy for this person to do. To fall in and out of so-called material worldly love is very easy. He becomes very frugal. He did not take enough food. He was ready to die even for 1 rupee. He never spent money and piled up endlessly. How could he have any good desire in his mind? He did not give in charity. If somebody wanted to give, he prevented him. He always abused saintly people. Human beings in general are very, very, they come to a conclusion too fast. What do? They look at a sadhu. They say, oh, this fellow is not a sadhu, he's a robber. He's a chore. How can you be so judgmental of anybody? Let that person be a chore or whatever. What is it to you? Our immediate thought is, when you see a poor man begging in the streets, the thought immediately goes out to, why can't you go and work somewhere? Judgmental. Human beings are judgmental in a very, very cynical manner. They are absolutely cynical. They don't want to even say that, take it into account that person must have really gone through hell. No. A man becomes judgmental very fast. So this is the problem with human beings. The material worldly person is constantly judging. He has himself never bothered to give to charity any time. I think I have discussed about charity a few days ago. But let me give you one more rundown about charity. Man keeps on earning money for himself, spends on himself for whatever that he wishes to do, spends for his rentals and this and that, transportation, for his food, for everything, for his wife, for his children, everything he will spend money for. And if he has to do charity, he will take out 10 rupees, 20 rupees, 100 rupees or 1000 rupees and say, okay, here it is for charity. God has given this person a certain amount so that not only does he take care of himself, but takes care of the poor people, whoever is needy. So charity means that. In the Christian and the Islamic traditions, they say that 10% of your income you need to give to the church or the, masjid or whatever the place that is there. in their case, it is literally like a compulsory thing, and nobody is going to put a gun at your head. But sometimes it is important that you do that. But whereas Hinduism is concerned, nobody gives a damn. They think that 100% of the income which they own is not sufficient for them. They need to have 200 or 500% of it. It's when I get 500% that I can willingly give about $1,000. Wow. This is the attitude of a human being. At least in Hinduism, this is how a Hindu person thinks. He doesn't say that I want to give my 10% income to this, to charity. Never does he think like that. Because it is not written in our scriptures, no. So it is okay, doesn't matter. Yes, when I go to the temple, I have to give bribe to the temple priest, yes, to get a proper darshan. He is willing to do that. But not for all these other things. So here, Samartha Ramdas is talking about, he does not give to charity. If somebody else wants to give, he prevents him. This was written during the time of Shivaji Maharaj. Okay? Now imagine if this was written during the time of Shivaji Maharaj 500-600 years ago. The conditions are worse than that today, isn't it? That time, what did Samartha Ramdas say? He said, give to charity. And if one person is giving something, they'll say, why are you giving? So during that time also it was the same story. He always abused saintly people. He did not know how to visit sacred places, nor observe fast, etc., did not welcome any guests. He was so miserly that he even picked a particle of grain from the mouth of an ant. This is a way of talking, okay? What it means is, we say, even if one 5 paisa coin is lying on the floor, he will take it. Maybe it is filled with soot or dust or whatever. He will go home, wash it and use it. Now 5 paisa coins are not there. Maybe it's a rupee coin. Or maybe it is a 10 rupee coin. A person is definitely going to do that. He is going to pick it up. In Mumbai, I still remember people what they do during this, April Fool Day or something like that. They will take one coin and they will glue it to the road. And those who are passing on the road look at the coin. Oh, there's a coin fallen on the road. And they try to remove it. And then everybody over there laughs at it. Because it's a joke. You see, we are like that. We say, na, hum aise hi hai. Indians are like that only. Like that. We are like that only. So if the 10 rupee coin or a 1 rupee coin is there, they will try to remove that coin also. Well, so a person has to visit all these places which are very important, sacred places, observe fast and so on and so forth. He never did good work, did not like others doing it and ridiculed others about it because he did not like it. The material worldly person, the misery of a family life. A person who is in the family life, this is what he thinks. He harassed devotees and insulted gods, gave trouble to others physically and gave a lot of mental torture by harsh words to many people. I still remember there are lots of people whom I have faced in the past. And you just tell them, that I am a spiritual person. They immediately deride you. They talk in derision. They say, this guy is useless. He's not worthy. How can you be so judgmental? Do you know all the spiritual folks in this world actually pray for all these kind of people? That is the way a person has to be. You should not be bothered about what the other person says in spiritual. By leaving all thoughts about morality behind, he indulged in bad conduct and was always puffed up by pride. So we are talking about this person who is he is a person who is in the family. One second. Am I going correctly? Yes. A person who is involved in family life. Yes, we are in the correct page. He slandered his ancestors, never performed any rites after their death, and even disregarded his family deity. In the Sai Satcharitra, I still remember there is a story where the person has completely forgotten that some saint had given some money to this person. He has completely forgotten his family deity also. Please remember, every family has a deity. Okay, we call it Kul Daivat. Kul. Daivat means the god, which everybody in the family prays to. Then there is a Gam Devi, that is Gram Devi, the Devi who is connected to the village. So there are Devis which are connected in the village as well. You have to give them what you owe. Every person owes it to them. We should never deride them. So, he slandered his ancestors, never performed any rites after their death, and even disregarded the family deity. Always give importance to the family deity also. He called his sister for dinner to represent his family deity and her husband who has come to take her back, and was giving dinner as a representative of God. Thus he avoided giving anything to outsiders. Is it... Okay. He never liked the mythological stories of God. He had nothing to do with God at all and used to say, why should one say daily prayers which are useless? Those who are sitting for the satsang, ask yourself this question and ask the people around you, do they even say the daily prayers? Nobody. You will find that for them to pray is the most toughest thing in the world, because most of it is forgotten. They might have learnt as a kid, but your parents, your grandparents and all, now everybody around you, all your friends and all, I don't think they ever pray. For them, prayer is very difficult thing to do. Why should I pray? There is already somebody over there praying. So, okay, let him pray. So this is what, now imagine this was 500 years ago. By great greed, he hoarded money, he deceived others, and in the prime of his youth, he was very arrogant with people. He was having bubbling youth and could not control his passion, and one day he committed the sin which was very undesirable. The second wife was not yet of age and he was impulsive. He in the end, without consideration for what relatives will say, went with them to another woman. This doesn't happen in my family, we are not like this. Go and dig up your family history, you will come to know that these kind of people do exist in your world as well. There are examples in everybody's life. We may say, this doesn't happen to me, but very well it happens to you. Everybody has skeletons in the cupboard. So we should not point at other person. Everybody has skeletons in the cupboard. He did not respect his mother or sister, or because of having immoral connection with other women. He was once punished under the law. Even then he did not improve. As soon as he saw some woman, his desire for her was uncontrollable. Again, by sin, he became miserable. In this way, he committed a lot of sin in his life, and there was no discrimination of good and bad, and he contracted wild diseases. He was afflicted by, now in olden times it was tuberculosis, but I will instead say AIDS and other diseases over here. Okay. I think those are applicable today. Coronavirus, AIDS, and all the other diseases that are there. Okay. And suffered immediately as a result of his own action. There were boils all over his body. His nose was mutilated and all good signs were replaced by the bad ones. Is he talking of today's day? Or is he talking of those days? Today also it's the same thing, isn't it? Especially because of the pandemic that is happening around us. I think this is like a very common phenomena. There are so many million people affected. In India also we have crossed a very big figure now. And in India also, again, China has again gone back for the second round. The body became weak, he suffered various ailments, the strength of youth was gone and he was emaciated. There were pain all over the body, he became very ugly and his body started trembling because of nervous breakdowns. I still remember seeing old Marathi plays somewhere in my past. And there was always one character like this. And this character was either he was drunk or he had relations with so many women and so on and so forth. And he was thin and lanky and always given to all that. Way back, there were characters who were playing this. I remember a very good actor. His name was Nilu Phule. I don't know how many of you will actually remember Nilu Phule. But Nilu Phule represented this kind of a person. He was a very important character actor. So, reminded me of those times. Yes. His hands and feet are affected and worms infested them. People started to spit on him and turn their faces away. He was having diarrhea and all around him there was obnoxious smell. He was a horrible picture of disease. He started to cry and pray to God, "Oh God, give me death. I have suffered a lot. Is not the stock of my sins finished yet?" Instead of this, just translate into somebody who is now in the hospital because of the pandemic. Or think of a person who is suffering very badly because of some serious disease. Isn't he asking the same question to God? What have I done? Isn't this thing going to get over any time? You see, today most of you are healthy people, so you don't feel this problem in your life. But when a person gets affected, you will really understand what the person goes through. And today the whole world is actually going through this. And if you were to have empathy, you will understand what these words mean. He thus sobbed and again and looked at his miserable body and became so pitiable that he could not stop crying. In this way there was a lot of misery. His family life was spoiled and robbers took away the money he had hoarded up. Now who are the robbers? Robbers are their own relatives. Okay? They will take up all the money that is there. He was a loser of happiness in this life as well as the life beyond. What a tragedy it was. He was so weak that he himself had to clean his urine and feces, which he could not do properly. One day the sins were over and his ailments subsided day by day. He was given good medicine by a doctor and he was cured. So finally, after going through all that pain, now he is cured. Let us say that, think like that. Thus he came back from the gates of death. And people started saying that luckily this man has survived and he has been restored to the society. Having become strong again, he brought his wife again to his home and started family life with all his selfishness. Most of you may think that this doesn't happen. But it did happen. I have seen people right here itself in the last couple of years. Some of the people were very sick. Some of them have been completely, on deathbed. But the moment they get out of it, the moment they are hale and hearty, they want to go back into that same world of theirs. A person who has gone through one marriage, has gone through a hell of a marriage, wants to get into another one very soon. There was one case which came to me last year. This couple was there. And they were happily married, sort of. I mean, they had an affair before and they were staying together, and then they took this, they got married and then they settled down. And it so happened that after some 5 or 6 or 7 years of marriage, I don't know how many years, but the man started having an affair with another woman. And this woman was already married. One day it came to light of his wife. His wife came to know, oh, this man is having an affair. So she threw a tantrum and she made a very big scene. Somehow That other woman's husband came to know, and one day he came to this man's house and bashed him up. Now, this story started some time back, so I'm telling you what happened last year. Last year, this woman took a divorce from her husband, the second one. And the day she took the divorce, she has been hounding this man. Now I want to marry you. You please leave your first wife. And for the last 1 year, this man is in terrible pain. He doesn't know what he's supposed to do because his first wife is not giving him, divorce or anything like that. So every day he sneaks inside his house and sneaks outside the house, and he has to meet the other woman outside. And life is hell from both the sides now. What is the point in getting married? And what is the point in getting married the second time? I really don't understand. People, those who are in the family life, they should not get involved in this kind of activities. It's going to be hell. From one affair to another, to another, to another. Do you think life is going to be worthwhile? It's going to be worthless. Having become stronger, I think we did that. He earned some money. Life was again started, but there was no child and home life was futile. There was no son. People called him childless. So he desired to have at least a daughter. For having an issue, he took many vows, observed fast, and went to places of pilgrimage again. I told you, only when a person is in desperate need that he will go and seek God. As if God is somebody over there where you have to, say, God, please give me child. God, please give me wife. God, please give me job. God, please give me money. You think God is some person over there who is sitting, okay, now this person has come. What is he come for this time? Children. Okay, let me sanction him at least half a dozen of them. What do you think? This is how God is to be treated? Only when time of need that you go and turn towards him? Like I explained earlier, you have to keep on doing this on a regular basis. Take the name of God not for your ulterior motives, but because you love God. That's it. You have to be in love and in devotion to the Lord. The parents were worshipping many gods because they had suffered sorrow, but even this child... The parents madly loved... where did I go? The family happiness was turned into sorrow because of lack of child. Then some deity blessed him and he got a son. The parents madly loved this child and did not allow it to be out of sight. If it was having some trouble, they used to cry. The parents were worshipping many gods because they had suffered sorrow, but even this child suddenly died due to past sins. Sometimes children are born and then they die, or they take birth and they are alive for a few years, they die again, or something or the other happens. It all happens because of karma. Please remember this. Here the word sin can be replaced by the word karma. Okay? Their sorrow was tremendous. They cried, "Why has God made us live without a child? What is the use of money? Let the money be spent, but we should have an issue. We are ready to give up everything for a child." First there was no issue at all, and now the child has died and a different kind of barrenness was in their lot. Today, I think a lot of men and women go to this fertility clinic. There's a whole load of money in that clinic. Please understand this. They go and they spend pots of money over there trying to conceive. While they are trying to conceive, on the other hand, there are everyday fights in the house. This kind of family doesn't last for long. Even if there is a conception happening, even if a child is born, very soon there is going to be a breakup. And then what is the point in bringing a child in the house, and then having a breakup so that somebody else will take care of the child? What is the point in doing that? So, I think even in olden times there was this kind of an issue. There were no fertility clinics there. The fertility clinics were run by the gods, local gods over there, okay? So they went to them, "Oh God, please give me this and please give me that." There were special gods for that, by the way. I hope you know that. So, they cried, "Oh God, Why the creeper of our family was cut? Our whole life has no meaning. Family deity is angry. The lamp of our family is extinguished now. If I will see the face of my son, then I will walk over burning coals or in front of the deity. I will get my body pierced by pokers. Oh, this is a very special thing which a person wants to torture himself. They think that by torturing their body, they are going to get something. If you get something by this kind of, dubious means, you are threatening God and you are saying, if you don't give me, I will do this for you. You are not a blackmailer. So don't try to blackmail God and thinking, okay, I will do this only if you give me this. Never do that. Oh Goddess Mother, I will arrange for your ritual. I will name my son as a heap of refuse. I will put bridle in my nose. But please fulfill my desire. They swore in the name of many gods to do certain things. They searched and asked many monks and did even such nasty things like swallowing whole scorpions. I'll tell you a very funny story that happened a few days ago. I had gone to a village somewhere. And I just told those people that you can dig over here for a well. So they brought in a dowser. You know dowsers? They use that rods and then they douse. If you don't know, go to Google and check it out. Those are the village guys who will douse for water. And he went about the whole field and he came to the spot which I had already indicated. This is the place you dig for water, you will get it. Now the head of the village was with us. Now it so happened that place was marked, and because I had already pointed it out and this dowser also pointed the same place, so this person remembered it. A few days ago there was a call saying that, please can you ask Guruji to come and tell us the exact spot where we can dig for water. Why? Because we spent lakhs of rupees in digging up in another place and we have gone so many feet deep and there is no water there. So can you please tell Guruji to come, because you see he pointed the correct spot. You understand, this is the kind of thing which is there. You think I am some dowser or some person that can be used for this kind of an activity? This is what people use gods and godmen for. Those who are on the path of spiritual, they think that these people are magic people. When the person looks at that person and everybody is going to be all right. So do you understand this? So people, they talk like this. Oh Goddess Mother, I will arrange for your rituals. I will name my son. Put a bridle in my nose. Please fulfill our desires. They swore in the name of many gods to do certain things. They searched and asked many monks and did even such nasty things like swallowing whole scorpions. They worshipped spirits, consulted mediums of gods, offered bananas, coconuts, mangoes to Brahmins. So they undertook many strange things to get a son, but the destiny turned their face away. They bathed under trees by which even the fruit-bearing trees were scorched. So to have a son, they did many wrong things also. They had done away with their money. Their mind was in great anxiety, and one day their god, Khande Rao, and the family deity was pleased. Their wishes were fulfilled. The parents were happy now. The listeners may pay attention further. Thus in the third Dashaka of Das Bodh, in the dialogue between the Guru and the disciple, the third chapter by name, The Misery of Family Life 2, is completed here. So it so happens that in their life, they have tried with all the various gods, it never happened. They became miserable, they had no money left, and suddenly their deity, you remember the family deity? Now in this case it is Khandoba. In Maharashtra the family deity can be Khandoba also. Khande Raya they call him. Every village has it. They have Vetal, Khande Raya, this one, that one, too many of these kind of gods. So Khande Raya got very happy with them and he is now blessed them. Okay, so we are going to see chapter 4 tomorrow, and then we'll come to know exactly what happened with this person. Till then, I'll take your leave. You have a very great evening and take care of yourself, and see you all tomorrow. Bye.